Welcome to More Than a Refresh, a podcast about data and the people who wrangle it. Today we are recording from Astoria, Queens, Williams, Arizona, and Bedford, New Hampshire. Our guest is Dr. Lauran Star. Lauran, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Lauran Star. I am a workplace inclusion, diversity, and equity psychologist, strategist, and speaker. I work within organizations heading up diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and leading them to fulfillment. It's pretty much what I do. My background is pretty diverse. So I'm a veteran. I have two disabilities, and I come from a multi-ethnic family. So I have quite a bit of diversity in my background, and that's pretty much me in a nut.
Okay, so let's talk about, there's two things here that came up that are of particular interest. One, I'm going to state, but I want to table because I want to go back to the other one first. And the first one is you
Sure.
said IDE. Most people know DEI. Now, we'll get to that. Hang in there with me. I actually, if you don't mind, would like to talk about the disabilities. And the reason
Yes.
is this. It is my other half has chronic conditions.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of, mentality out there that to have a disability is bad, or there's something wrong with you or something like that, when in fact, pretty much everybody has a disability of some sort. Are you comfortable elaborating on that a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there is this. We tend to hide, those of us with disabilities. We've come from, especially my generation, right? Gen Xers and older. We tend to hide those disabilities. There's like a shame to it. I have a learning disability. I am dyslexic. On top of that, I also have a spinal disability, which limits some of my movement. And in the workplace today, if you're not hiring employees with disabilities, you're missing out, because just because we have a disability, it doesn't define us. What defines us is our perceptions and thoughts and what we bring to the table for ideas and problem solving and solutions. And any disability is just it's like having blonde hair or blue eyes. A disability is just part of what makes you unique. It makes you who you are. And in the workplace, with the great resignation, with the turnover rates that we're looking at, disabled, they're like they really are. They are the edge, right? They're that cutting edge of workers. We've been ignored for so long, and pushed off to the side, that I think today we're starting to see real strong impact in the workplace by hiring those with disabilities. So, it's something that we need to start plugging into from an organizational lens. I create and impart neurodiversity programs where we are looking at the strengths of those that may have neurodisabilities like ADHD or autism, and we look at their strengths and what can they do, and then plug them into the workplace, and it's a win all around. Because what we find with disabilities, anyone that's neurodivergent, is they're a lot more creative. They see the world very differently. The lens that we apply to the world is without the shade of blue or red, and we tend to be loyal. And yeah.
Okay. Well, I find it interesting because, like, as I mentioned, my partner does have chronic conditions. In the particular situation she's in, she's called what is called a spoonie. Do you know this term?
Hmm.
Okay. For those who don't know, a typical person has, a vault of energy, or a barrel of energy, and then we have reserves. So we can go through our day and, it doesn't matter what we're doing, whether we're programming, whether we're building a fence, whatever, we reach the end and we may be able to rest and then start again in another hour, or we can kind of, as they say, suck it up and keep going. Spoonies don't have that opportunity. Spoonies have
Mm-hmm.
exactly a specific number of spoons for a specific number of tasks per day. And when you reach the end of those spoons, they are done. They don't have reserves. Um, and so it was kind of interesting that, I mean, you were so vocal about having disabilities. Um, Beyond that, we addressed that. I really am curious about this IDE versus DEI, and I'm going to let you explain it all. But one of the reasons I am is because I have always thought that the DEI is incorrect. The
Mm-hmm.
order is incorrect because it puts in my mind, it puts an unfair weight on this idea of diversity. Not that diversity isn't important, but that it seems to me that diversity really shouldn't even be the issue. Inclusion should be the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So can you elaborate on your ideas and what you teach and why this is important?
Sure. So we've done it wrong. Organization, I'm just going to put it out there, JD, right? We have messed up DE&I. There's so much confusion around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it really depends on whose lens you're talking to as to how they see DE&I. A lot of people think DE&I is the exact same thing, and it's really not. Um, I don't know from a corporate lens that organizations focused on diversity first because when it was spun out, right, when it was shared, diversity is what we were first talking about. We've been doing diversity for 60 years. And we haven't got any further than we were 60 years ago. The issues are still there. So let's level set a little bit. What is diversity? What is diversity? Diversity is different affinities. Diversity in the workplace is one of two things. It is how we measure the differences in the workplace based on affinities and what makes us unique. The goal of diversity is diversity of thought. The benefit of diversity, there's one, diversity of thought. Now, you may be saying, well, gee, Lauran, right? There's all these articles. They're right. Everybody's touting the benefits of diversity. Unfortunately, it's being spun. Those aren't the benefits of diversity. Those are the benefits of inclusion. Let's take a step back. Let me simplify. Diversity is when you rip open a bag of Skittles and you separate the Skittles out into their color groups. So you have a yellow group, a red group, a purple group, a green group, an orange group. And then you look at your table and you see the different groups of color. That's diversity. Diversity of thought is the flavors that they bring together. So we know that the yellow group, right? The yellow group is going to be lemon and the green group is going to be lime, right? Based on their lived perspective, based on, right, their cultural identity, their ethnicity, like what was the core focus of putting them in the group. For this example, it was color, and all of the yellows have a lemon flavor. Okay, great. So that's diversity. Inclusion is when we shove all those Skittles back in the bag. We shake that bag up. We dump 3 into our hands. We might get a yellow, a green, and an orange. When you pop that in your mouth, inclusion is when you have a whole new flavor, where you appreciate what the yellow, the green, and the orange bring to the table. That's inclusion. So organizations that focus on diversity first are just creating a revolving door because employees, if inclusion is not part of their organizational cultural foundation, employees are going to leave, right? Every human wants to go into the workplace and feel appreciated and heard, have a voice at the table, be seen for who they are able to bring their whole self into work, right? That they don't want to have to hide or change their hairstyle or change how they dress to fit in with the norm. Everyone wants that, right? It's part of Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? It goes back to psychological safety. If you have an organization that's lacking inclusion, you are lacking psychological safety. You are lacking valuing individuals as they are. And when that happens, employees leave. It's a revolving door. You may be hiring the best of the best, the brightest of the brightest, and they happen to be diverse. But if your culture's not inclusive, they're going to leave you. And they're going to take everything you've taught them and go to a competitor. That's the nuts and bolts of DE&I. And that's why I argue so much that inclusion has to come first. But the last 60 years, we've been focusing on diversity first. Quota attainment, affirmative action. That's where our lens has been in the business world. I still see, JD, which kills me, I still see job postings here and there that want a chief diversity officer that's going to be able to drive affirmative action in their organization. And I ping those companies because those are companies I would not want to work for, because quota attainment is just diversity. There is no inclusion. Did that clarify it a bit?
It does for me. And as an employer, we certainly have this issue. And when we go through our interview process, one of the things that we do is we don't talk about diversity. We talk about inclusion specifically, and then obviously equity. But the inclusion portion in our world, being that we're in tech, there's a number of different issues that we're running. And I'm sure a lot of businesses are running into this, but being in tech, it's a little bit more pervasive. We have the issue of, biological sex disparity. We have the issue of religious disparity. This is a big one. And now, because of the poison that is the mass media, we have political disparity. So what we focus on is saying, look, we have evangelical Christians, we have atheists, we have agnostics, we have Republicans, we have Democrats, we have libertarians. We're not here for that. That's what makes us well-rounded. We all come together the way we used to. The way we used to come together, and not everybody. I mean, there are going to be people who say, well, we've never been all together, and we never will, because of the tribal effect. The only thing that we can do is try to make it better within each generation. And I do think that our generation is doing much better than the generation before us, and certainly better than the generation before that.
Sure.
Yeah. So the inclusion part is where it's so interesting to me that you focus, because everywhere you look, like you said, you still see job postings. I don't see those job postings, but in like the open source communities and things like this, I see people constantly, I mean, to the point where they'll say, we need to have 3 females on this committee.
Yes.
Right?
That's the damage. Yes.
Yeah. And as much as I appreciate that, I mean, sure, but what if only one of them is qualified? And it should be the same for men, right? Don't get me wrong. If the men aren't qualified, they shouldn't be there. But the idea that somehow you're on deck because you're a woman, or because you're homosexual, or because you're white, it doesn't matter. That's the problem. You should be on deck for the value that you bring.
Yeah, you bring an interesting paradigm that we're facing right now in the corporate world of how do we balance all of that. And I think we need to face reality. We want to hire the best of the best, right? The best, the brightest, the person that's going to get the job done. And yes, we want some diversity. Why do we want diversity? In a nutshell, it's a different thought process. It's a different perspective. It'll be a different lens into solutions. Like, that's it. But if that person isn't qualified, it does more harm than good to that affinity group. Think about that, right? It does more. If you hire a candidate based on their affinity because you want to plug a number, and they totally mess up the job, that taints everyone's view around them. So we want to be hiring the best of the best, and we want to be looking for those diverse candidates that are the best of the best. However, we also have to recognize that women in technology is fairly new, right? When we look at women in technology, there wasn't a push in my day to study math and science. I'm a psychologist. Right. That's the avenue I was pushed in, even though I was really good at math and science. Pushed in a different direction, right? That's how society. Right. I'm a woman, so I didn't go that route. Today, we're now starting to see more and more. I look at, and it's so funny because my daughter, one of my daughters, she's going to school for chemical engineering, and she's freaking brilliant. And in her class, it is a 50-50. 50 male, 50 female, right? 50 male, 50 female. It's a 50-50 swap. We're now just starting to see that. So it's crazy to think that you're going to be hiring positions and then to throw a quota attainment on it that, well, we want more women. Well, I also want a lobster dinner, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to go out and grab a lobster, right? They're just not here in Bedford, New Hampshire. I have to go to the coast for that. So if we're throwing quotas out there and saying, well, we want more women within the organization, where are you looking for them? And you're going to have to get creative, and you're going to have to make that job offer attractive to women, because women have different outlooks and needs than men do. Just is what it is.
Now you've touched on two things.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. First, let's pen that, the different needs. I actually had this discussion at one time with our producer. And then the second one is affirmative action. Because I think that one of the things that isn't addressed in our situation is that while you're right, there may not be enough women or African Americans or whatever the affinity is within a particular market. That is, I think, there's two parts of this. There's a cultural part. Well, it's both cultural, but the first one is like you mentioned. You were great at math, but you weren't pushed to do math.
No.
In fact, I was great at things like debate and law. I was not pushed to do that, which is actually good because I would have failed. But there's an underlying societal issue that we have that we don't seem to want to address, and that's proper education. How are we going to have inclusion? How are we going to, if African Americans represent 20% of the population and Hispanics represent 20% of or 15% of the population, and then you have your 50-50 gender split, how do we address getting more, for example, African Americans into a equitable situation where they can pursue tech or medicine or engineering, when many of the neighborhoods that African Americans reside the schools aren't attractive. They don't teach what they should, all that stuff. And then you get into this very strong tribal effect of, I don't want to be like those people. And then you throw affirmative action on top of that. So you end up hiring you said in the corporate workplace, but this is also a problem in academia, right?
It is.
You are no longer hiring to provide the best that you can within your resources. You are hiring, as you said, to fulfill a quota, or accepting into a new university to fulfill a quota. That seems like, and if you look long lens, that's going to end badly for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, JD, there's so much to unpack there. Right? And I think you're dabbling, right? You've got your toe now into the whole equity debate. Can we have workplace equity and workplace equality? No, you can't, because they fly in the face of each other, right? Equality, everybody, yeah. Everybody gets the same equity. You get what you need. But what is that need and what is that cost to the organization? Underlining that are the socioeconomic barriers that you're right. There are marginalized communities. A lot of the marginalized communities are in poor, right? They grow up in poorer communities with poor education. You can't compete with the affluent areas on that educational lens. So, how do we have equality or equity in the workplace if society's not there? How does that translate over? You can't. You really can't. And that affirmative action, I mean, dare I say it? I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here, so Lynn's can like
You say whatever the fuck you want.
Great. Affirmative action is a shit show. Point blank. It is. It really is. Affirmative action was great in the 70s and 80s in that quota attainment was really set to increase diversity in the workplace, provide equal opportunity to job fulfillment. Okay, that was great in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Great. But the 90s and moving forward, our social class and our globalization has changed. And affirmative action doesn't work today. In fact, affirmative action is now causing reverse discrimination.
Yes.
Where we're seeing individuals, right? You mentioned like UNC, University of North Carolina, and Harvard, where they're saying, well, we can't admit any more Asians because we've hit our affirmative action quota. Well, wait a minute. So if I'm an Asian and I've blown out my high school years, right? I've got the 4.5 to 4.7, depending on what school district you went to. I now can't get into my top rated school because you have too many Asians. That's crazy. And you laugh, but I have a close friend who looked at a world renowned technology institution in Boston. And that's what she was told on the tour, that this university has too many Asians, so don't bother to apply. And she's like, are you kidding me?
Thank you, MIT.
I didn't say that. But,
no,
right?
You didn't. I did.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because what you described here, I'm going to throw I don't even know what the term, a popular term, white privilege. Okay. And I believe that and a lot of people misunderstand what that term means. It doesn't mean that white people don't work hard or whatever. It's that as a general rule, because you are Caucasian, there are certain privileges that you don't have to work quite as hard for. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. We all have privilege to some varying degree.
No, absolutely. But the point that the reason I bring it up is because you take a class of people, Asians, who said, okay, not only do I want the privilege that Caucasians already have, I'm willing to bust my ass to get it. And we're not talking about, well, like you said, 4.5s, 4.7s. If I got a 2.5, you know what? That's a C, enough for me because it's not going to affect my future. These folks looked at society as a big lens and said, how do I get what they got? And they went after it generationally. I mean, what's the funny joke about how, when you grow up Asian, it's like you're going to be a doctor or an engineer. But I want to be a psychologist. No, you're going to be a doctor or an engineer, right? That's the parent. And if you got a 4.1, that wasn't good enough, right? And so now we have this class of people, this tribe, this affinity of people that did everything right, exceptionally. And now we're saying, because you did everything right exceptionally, you are no longer equitable or included for us. I
Crazy.
just don't.
It doesn't make sense. It is it is flipping crazy. I mean, the mere fact that so I have twin daughters, and my other daughter she wants to go to med school, and yes, she's right. We're privileged. I'm going to put it out there, right? I moved to Bedford, New Hampshire. It is an affluent town. It has a phenomenal school district. My husband and I live very much in our means, so we don't have the mansion here. But I made sure my kids got the best education possible so they could go to the schools that they wanted to go to. That's a privilege. I recognize that. I recognize that that's a privilege. But that privilege now, she's applied to one university in Boston, and that's where she really wants to go. And she got knocked out because she's white and privileged.
Yeah, let's be. I think for our listeners, because there might be a few here that are their tea kettles getting a little hot. Say something something very clear here. This is not to say that we should not give a hand up. This is not
No,
to say that we should not help people, that we should not look at socioeconomic issues and find ways to solve them and to lift them up into an equitable and inclusive position. It's to say that the current system is broken. What's
the
happening
current
now
system
is
is broken.
broken.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into how can we fix that, let's talk about your career path, because you said you're a veteran. You said you had two disabilities. May I ask, is the spinal disability due to your veteran status?
No, actually, I fell down a flight of stairs at Hartford Hospital. Yeah.
You were at the hospital and you. Oh, see, I was going to
I
accuse
was
you of
at the
drinking too much white
hospital when I
wine.
fell down the flight of stairs. Yes,
Uh, there could be worse places to hurt yourself. Um,
there could
but
be.
you have had a varied career, right? You said you are a veteran. Can we talk about that a little bit? I mean, you performed on Broadway. How is this working? What is that all
Yeah.
about?
So how is this working, right? Yeah, my background. Um, right, I graduated high school with a 2.5. And that was like me like rocking it, right? Like I am dyslexic. I can't read, my friends. Like I don't know how else to say it. So I got into theater because you just had to act and ad lib a little bit, and I got really good at it. So that's where the Broadway comes in. Um, because of my low GPA, there wasn't a lot of there was no merit scholarships.
Right.
When my kids took the SAT, I got a 280, 280 taking the SATs four times. 280, 280 were my two top scores. And they give you 200 points for just showing up. I mean, there's no merit scholarships there. Um, None whatsoever. And that's okay. Right, but I still managed to get into school, get into a college and start my studying, but unfortunately money ran out. So I joined the military. And fortunately, I was diagnosed with dyslexia just before I joined the military. And I was diagnosed with dyslexia from my freshman English teacher. She's like, "You are dyslexic. Like this is a train wreck." And for our listeners, keep in mind we didn't have computers. We didn't have any of that. It was, you submitted a paper that you hand wrote or you typed it, which is a nightmare for someone with dyslexia. Okay, so I joined the military. And when I went to the military, I took the ASVAB exam, the entrance exam. And here's what's interesting. The ASVAB exam is printed on blue paper, which is great for someone with dyslexia because
Why? How
changes
so?
the visual field. It changes the visual field. It changes the visual field that all of a sudden for me, letters were no longer moving or inverting. And it wasn't a test on, right? It's an aptitude test. It's not on how, right? Do you remember algebra? How well can you? It's not that. It's written really at that fourth grade. Even some of the problem solving. It's very, very basic. Hey, as a high school graduate with a 2.5, I can do that. I killed the ASVAB, blew it out of the water. So now I got a little of the, oh, okay, I'm not stupid. There is some potential here. And the military put me in the medical field. And what I noticed, and this is really where my inclusionary journey began, spending 10 years in the military, you don't have a choice who your battle buddy is. I was a trauma medic, served in the first Gulf War, helicopter. Whoever was in the helicopter was in the helicopter. And I had to rely on them to keep my ass safe, regardless of their gender or ethnicity. And honestly, women weren't we weren't as popular, right? We weren't having the enlistment numbers back in the late 80s. So, I'm one of few and far between. And it's what I like to call forced inclusion. The military got it right. Right? My battle buddy, it didn't matter that she was lazy as shit. She was lazy. I had to pick up after her. Right? But her strength, this girl could throw a hand grenade and get it. She was just amazing with hand grenades. I was like, that's my battle buddy. Right? We need to blow shit up. She's my girl. We're good there. I don't mind carrying. I don't mind picking up after you because I know you can blow shit up. It's forced inclusion. Think about it, right? You figure out what each other's strengths are. I remember flying a medical mission, and I'm your trauma medic, and another trauma medic was with me, and it's a guy, right? A gentleman. And our approach to the patient was very different, but it saved the patient's life. Because I relied on his strengths, he relied on my strengths, and then we tag teamed in. That's inclusion.
So let's touch
from there. Figure 10 years. Go ahead.
No, I didn't.
Well, you figure 10 years. I get out of the military. Yeah, I get out of the military. I go, reserves and inactive ready reserves, and I start working in corporate America, and I start hearing glass ceiling, glass ceiling, glass ceiling, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't know what this means, because in the military you are promoted based on merit, based on what you on your skill level. I don't get this glass ceiling. And I working with organizations, I kept going, there is no glass ceiling. It is a scapegoat. It is a rationale to why you're not advancing. And I take it very seriously, in that if you think that there is a glass ceiling, if you think something is holding you back in the workplace, if you can't solve it in 3 months, you have a choice. Either live with it or leave the organization. It costs money for the organization to replace you, to the tune of anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 on entry-level college grads. So leave the organization. That's where my journey into DE&I really started, or I would say that's where my foundation comes from, is this forced inclusion. It worked. It worked. I didn't have a choice. It wasn't like I could be like, I quit my battle buddy. Yeah, she won't pick up after herself. Can I have a different one? And then not an option. Yeah.
All right. So first, let me say, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, but in a completely brotherly way, I love you. Okay?
Gotcha.
That being said, there's two things. I almost forgot this, and then I realized, wait, I have a little notepad right here so that I don't forget this. You said that if you want to, I'm paraphrasing, you said that if you want to bring more women into a corporate environment, you need to tailor your recruiting to women.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting problem. Or even, let me take that back. This is an interesting opportunity. It's definitely a learning opportunity. When our team puts out a job ad, we put out your standard, these are your benefits, this is what we expect, this is a short, brief sentence on our culture. So and then we encourage people, you need to read our website. If you come to the interview and you don't know who we are, you're wasting your time and hours, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people would consider that a very male perspective on how we put out our jobs, right? We don't necessarily say flexible work schedule, or I'm not sure. I'm not a woman, so I'm not exactly sure what you would want in a job description. Maybe it's maternity leave or flexible or daycare on site, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work?
So job description should be gender neutral, period. Right? You should be using inclusive language. It shouldn't have a he or a she. It should be a they. That's what we consider gender neutral. It should really focus in on the absolute must-haves. What must this person have from knowledge and skills? What do they absolutely have to have? Right? That's that providing an opportunity for, because here's a little secret. We know when men look at a job description, they go, I have this, I have this, oh, I don't have that. That's okay. I'll fake it till I make it. I have this, I have this. Oh, I don't have that. That's okay. I'm still going to apply. Right? Where a woman goes, I have this, I have this. I don't have that. I'm done. Next, moving on. So we really want to focus into the must, like these are your absolute must-haves. When I say that we should be, really recruiting with a female lens, what I mean by that is that then once you have your universal job description, right, that's neutral, that's gender neutral, then you should be going to or posting at the institutions that have a high level, which is above 20% for women in engineering, women in technology. It's, believe it or not, the national average is still below 20, right? So we want to look at a university that has a high level and reward that university for going out of their way to recruit women. Right? That's where you're going to want to recruit from. But that doesn't mean that, oh, this job description is only for a woman. Absolutely not. We still want to bring the best and the brightest. Now, how do we make that neutral job description attractive to women? And that's when we start listing benefits that the organization offers that are intriguing. Right? I'm sure, JD, your organization offers a lot more benefits than just pay, medical, dental, 401k. You probably have an employee access plan or an EAP, right, which might offer fitness reimbursement. It might offer, your insurance company may offer that. It might offer mental health counseling. It may it may offer Noom, right, a dieting program. You want to list all that in your description, all the benefits that you are putting out there, that your organization represents. Now, if that doesn't attract the women that you want to attract, then we might need to go back and look at your benefits. Are they male focused? But more than likely, they're not. It's just that we don't think when we're listing that job posting to put in those other benefits, right? We list the big ones, but we don't list the others. And women
I'll
look
give
for
you an
those.
example. We have, at command prompt, we have a book stipend. We don't ever list
Mm-hmm.
that, right? But it comes up in the interview. Someone will ask what else is out there. And one of the things we do is that we're big believers in professional development. And if you see a book you want to learn from, you can reimburse it up to a certain amount. Let's talk about, we're talking about corporate environments. We're talking about academia. We're talking about tech. They're all intermingled.
Mm-hmm.
But on this same problem, what about fields? Oh, well, let me phrase this quick. And I'm asking this honestly, are we trying to increase the inclusiveness and diversity of academia or tech, it doesn't matter, or corporate environment, because individuals want it or because
Mm-hmm.
society tells them they should. And this is my
Yeah.
example. This is my example. The plumber. How many female plumbers do you know? Plumbers make
I don't
great
know any.
money. Yeah,
They do.
I don't know any. They make great money. They're usually unionized. They have great benefits. You know, if they have
Mm-hmm.
to work at night, they get overtime. It's a solid forever job. I don't see anybody complaining that there are no women electricians, no women plumbers, no women
Mm-hmm.
contractors, no women trash or recycling people. I don't see any of that. But and a lot outside of the trash recycling people, those three fields pay very well. Or male nurses, for
Mm-hmm.
example. And I actually had a great conversation at one point with a nurse about how they would really like to have more male nurses because
Absolutely.
in reality, I mean, I don't care what anybody says. This is the science. Men, as a general rule, are what? Stronger. And if you
Yes.
have if you have an obnoxious patient or someone who's convulsing or something, a man is going to take less men to hold that person down than it would women. So there's an
Yes.
intrinsic benefit to male nurses. But what do you think about? I mean, do you think we're pressing on this the wrong way instead of versus what you said, which is aptitude?
Yeah. I think it's both. I truly believe you should be able to do whatever you want to do regardless.
Agreed.
Regardless, right? As long as you have that skill set. Um, we look at right, and here's the right beyond men being stronger. Who's going to understand a male patient better, a female nurse or a male nurse?
Well, I don't know. I mean, when I'm sick, I just want my mommy. I
You
mean,
just yeah, yes, yes. I
so
probably should have rethought that. Um, right, my husband, right? So I there's three women in this house, and then my son, and then my husband. And when we years ago, we had a drain that seriously clogged, to the point that the shower overflowed, ruined the first floor ceiling, the first floor, like it
oh,
like came right. Oh yeah, daughter in the shower. You can imagine it, right? There's water coming out of the light fixture. Horrible. Plumber comes in, male plumber, right? And he's like, well, shit, there's a ton of hair in this drain. Right? And my husband's like, well, the hair's not coming from me. Okay. Now imagine if it was a female plumber that came in and was like, ladies, it's your hair that's causing this. So right, and I don't fault Keith. Keith's like, so we're just going to fix this and replace this pipe and all's well with the world. He leaves it at that and leaves. And trust me, my husband was like, girls, too much hair, blah blah blah. But still, there's no freaking solution to the hair in the drain until one of my daughters went out and came home with these drain hair catchers. She's like,
mhm.
here, Dad. So you stop bitching at us about our long hair. I'm putting this to catch it. Now, a female plumber would have automatically thought that. In fact, I bet, because there are female plumbers out there, there's just not a lot of them. I bet they all have hair catchers in their
Okay.
shower because they know they have long hair and it's going to go down the drain and it's going to right that's that perspective that we're talking about when we have diversity in the fields, right? When we have diversity, we understand what our customer and our clients are looking for. I love when I talk to a male IT technician when my computer goes awry. He just doesn't get me. I'm like, but the thingy doesn't do this. Now, if I talk to if I talk to a woman IT person, I go, the thingy, she'd go, where's the thingy located on your keyboard? The male tech is like, what thingy? I don't know, the thingy. It's just not freaking working. She's going to ask where it is because you know what? She gets it. She gets the female lens. She
Mhm.
gets that perspective. That's why diversity is so important in business, especially as we globalize, especially as our own country becomes more and more diverse. Hey, I hate to say it, here, people, but in 2025, minorities are going to outnumber whites. That's right. Whites are going to be at 44% in the workplace. Now, if
I
we
don't
look
see
at
a problem with that.
you see a
You
problem
know,
with that?
no, I don't see a problem with
Oh, I
that.
don't see a
I
problem
think
with no,
that
I don't see a problem with that.
we need to start looking beyond what you just
Yes.
said. It doesn't matter that there are less whites or more blacks or Asians or
Mhm.
all of that's irrelevant. We have to be looking at the greater good as humanity. There's
It's
everyone here is a
humane.
human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm gonna move on here to your book. I want to make sure that we get this in here. But one thing I did want to mention, because you brought up the thingy on the computer.
The thingy.
The thingy on the computer. Um, as a father of two daughters and having an ex-wife and a partner now, I know what the thingy on the computer is. It took 2 decades of beating me to understand what the thingy on the computer is, but I do. But what I was going to bring up was I read an interview about mechanics. A lot of in fact, almost every mechanic is male. It's probably very similar to like the plumber situation. There are a few female mechanics, and if I was unmarried, that's probably who I would chase. But he was saying, how are men and women different when it comes to they bring their car in and there's something
Mm-hmm.
wrong? And he's like, well, as a man, men are easy, right? Even if they don't know the part, they're like, this is making this noise, and you're able to diagnose it. They know
Mm-hmm.
somehow we inherently know that red light on dash is bad, whereas for some reason women think the red light will get brighter as it gets worse, or something like that. Yeah,
It
see?
doesn't.
No. But
Wait a
what
minute.
he's
Wait a minute. JD, where did you learn? Wait a minute. Wait a minute here, right? It's not inherent, right? Men don't have this inherent understanding of cars. Where did you learn that? You
I
were
honestly don't
probably
know because I
around.
don't have a father.
Well, do you have friends? I mean,
I
you guys
there
would
what
probably
I
get
think it
together and
came
talk
from
cars.
is probably a natural affinity towards machinery. So I would read Car and Driver. I would take
Okay.
apart lawnmowers, things like that. Um,
Yes. I'm not going to do that. I'm not
no,
get my hands dirty. But, right, but to that point, JD, my daughters can change their own damn oil,
awesome.
right? Because my husband taught them.
Taught them.
Ah, right. But society didn't teach them that. My
Right.
husband did. Right. There's that. Right. We still have social norms that we're fighting every day. Um, that need to be taken into consideration. And trust me, when my daughter's boyfriend came over and he was like, "Oh, I'm going for an oil change," and she's like, "I'll change it for you." He was like, "What? You know how to change oil?" She's like, yeah, you don't? Like, you're a guy. You're supposed to, right? This is supposed to be inherent to you. What the hell, dumbass?
So,
Yeah,
so basically, they were both sexist.
right? And like they were both sexist. Exactly. I'm like, right? My girls can change their own tires. You can lift up a hood and my girls can tell you what everything is because that's how my husband bonded with my daughters when they were younger. Right? Whatever dad was doing, they wanted to do too. And let's be honest, JD, it's because I was like, go outside and bother your father. You know?
Well,
Go see dad.
what the mechanic was saying was that you have to listen to the
Mm-hmm.
woman because she may not know that it's the idle tensioner in the serpentine belt, but she does know it is now making a different noise, and the noise
Mm-hmm.
sounds like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you listen to the woman, and it's funny, this is as I say this, I'm like, well, okay, now we're getting into relationships. Listen to the woman. It's amazing how easy your life gets if you listen to the woman.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, that's what the mechanic was saying. He's like, no, they're not going to come in and say, look, I'm misfiring on piston 7. Right? They're going to say, it is no, it's running rough, or it's clacking, or whatever. And if you listen to
Mm-hmm.
that, you will be able to figure out what she's trying to tell you, and most likely where the problem lies.
Yes.
But
And,
we're go ahead.
and mechanics, good mechanics know that a woman is loyal to their mechanic. Like
Hmm.
I have a Subaru. I go to Subaru for all of my stuff. Yes, my husband's like, it's more expensive. I'm like, I don't care. I go in there and I say to my mechanic, right? And my front person and the mechanic, when I touch the gas pedal, it does this. They know exactly what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Right? They've taken the time to invest in their own development to understand what I like to call women speak, right? Where they're like, oh, I will never, right? I am loyal to Subaru. My kids all drive Subarus. I have a Subaru. Like, I'm loyal to them because they get me. They get me.
I'll
There's
tell you
not a
what,
woman in the
I
place.
will never own a Subaru.
I love my
Um,
Subaru.
I have nothing. This is how weird. I think people forget this. This is an example of bias that gets created.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing against Subarus. I know that they are perfectly respectable cars. They actually are quite capable in what they're made for. My ex-wife's family will die for a Subaru. Therefore, I
Uh,
will never own a Subaru.
therefore, and that's
I
okay.
know it's ridiculous. I'm not a Neanderthal. I know when I think about it. Okay, JD, that's ridiculous. But when I look at a Subaru, immediately my mind goes, nope, something else. I don't know why. I mean, it's what it is.
It is what it
All
is.
right,
That's
let's
okay.
get to your
All
book. Yeah, let's get to your book though. I don't want to lose
right.
this because this is important because you and I have been talking a lot, and a lot of what we've been talking about could be considered stereotyping. It could be considered sexist. It could be considered it, basically, like you said, social norms that maybe
Yeah.
they should be changed. So let's talk about something let's talk about science. Okay. You have
Sure.
evidence-based inclusion, right? Now, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of different types of evidence. There's observable evidence, there's in practice evidence, and there is science-based evidence. You know, talk to us about your book. How do you define evidence-based, and where would your research go with that?
Yeah. So when I wrote this book, I think I really, it's from, 15 years of slamming my head against the wall saying, listen to me, right? Diversity doesn't work in the workplace. And when I got my PhD, I love evidence. I love qualitative and quantitative, both lenses and numbers. Like, show me the number, prove it to me. Don't tell me diversity's gonna, if you're gonna say we need more diversity, I will say to that CEO, prove to me that you need more diversity. How do I prove that to you? Well, there's multiple ways to prove that, right? Let's take a look at your employee demographics. And what's really interesting about that is often when I say prove to me, I actually can show them that they have quite a bit of diversity because they're only thinking gender and color. They're not
Hmm.
thinking anything else. And I'm like, well, you've got veterans, you have people with disabilities, you have the pride community, you have trans, oh, well, we want more people of color. Why? Prove to me you need more people of color. Now, I know it's nice to have, right, more people of color. It's nice to have more ethnicity. But again, this goes back to affirmative action, and it didn't work. The research has shown affirmative action did not work. I've done the research. That's what the book is about. The book really takes a hard look at diversity from a research lens, from an evidence lens, and I walk the reader through why diversity in the first position doesn't work, and then I take it further and I talk about inclusion, such as, right, all those benefits that are being touted in the media. If you have more diversity, you'll see an increase in job performance. You'll see job satisfaction go through the roof. You'll see improvement in conflict management. The company will make 1.5 per person more than if you don't have diversity, right? The numbers go on and on. right? I'm going to say it. Bullshit. Bullshit. If you look at all of those studies, and I have looked at every friggin' study done in the DE&I space to date, as part of my dissertation, there's not one study that says diversity does this. What they say is one of the criterias, an inclusion criteria or exclusion, the organization must have a strong foundation in inclusion to be admitted into this study. Whoa, wait a minute here. Wait a minute here. These are all benefits of inclusion because that's the constant. Now, those diversity studies are looking at, in the workplace, affinity groups. That's it. You can't say having more blacks is going to drive your business over Hispanics. Can't say that. But yet that's diversity. So that's what this book really rips into, is looking at the information that's out there from a non-rose, that I've taken those rose-colored glasses off and I call bullshit left and right. And then to take it to that next step further, I then take a practical study that I am currently involved in, have been involved in now for 5 years. We now have 3-year data out showing you how to build an organizational culture of inclusion. Step by step, it's not rocket science. And what the data is showing us, utilizing this paradigm, is that we see year over year an increase in retention. We see an increase in diverse applications. We see an increase in job performance. We see we start seeing all of these increases as well as diversity. Right? Diversity is a benefit of inclusion.
Right.
And I honestly, JT, I have been hitting my head against a wall for 15 years arguing that. And this book just and the tone in the book is a little bit like that. Like, hello, wake up. Like these are the numbers. And you can't argue numbers when they are presented from both sides, from a balanced lens.
So what do we do? Well, first, the amount of online hate you receive must be enormous.
I love it.
Tell me,
Right,
why do
because
you?
at least I've stirred your mind to shoot. Right, if you're going to take the energy and effort to send me a hate email, then I hit something. Let's talk about that.
Well, that's true. I mean, well, I will say with the exception of the nut jobs, but yes, there absolutely there is. Okay, now why do you think this? What is your
Yeah.
interpretation of this or that? But
Or prove it.
DEI, yeah, prove it. Yeah, okay, I'm wrong. Prove it. DEI to me became fashionable.
Oh, yes.
It became. It is the. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, I was in New York, and I don't know if it's still there, but there's a Nike store in New York,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and there was a line around the store. I mean, ridiculously a long line, and I said, what's going on here? Guy looks at me and goes, they're releasing the new Jordan or something, right? Some new shoe. Now, I'm not judging here. I would stand in line for my own fair share of things. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But probably not. But there are things out there that I care deeply about that I would go the extra mile for. And if yours is Nike shoes, great, good for you. But it seems to me that what has happened in our society is that we have become a culture of what can we identify with to create control or authority over those that don't identify with it.
Mm-hmm.
So with like DEI, we have a large swath of the population, especially in academia, in politics, even in some corporate scenarios. I mean, I've seen what some of the big tech companies are starting to implement, not because it's good,
Hmm.
not because it results in a better workforce or better lives or more profit. It's because it's what the screamers say we must do.
Yeah.
Do you have any insight or historical press? I mean, I think to some degree that's always been the case, right? There's even all the way back, there's a popularity type of situation. It's
That's
natural, but we've now the anybody with the right message has an instant worldwide bullhorn.
yeah. And sometimes they're dumbasses with the bullhorn.
I find that if you have to scream about it, you're likely a dumbass.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, what is your take on that, though? How do we get back to this idea? And I don't like the idea that we would congratulate only on, no, let me rephrase. I think that we need to get back to not only effort, right? So let's bring the Asians back into the fold, right? They have just as much right to be here as we do, or
Absolutely.
Hispanics, or whatever. But I think we also need to take into account what you found with the ASFAB, which is aptitude.
Aptitude. Aptitude works. I mean, look at what they do in Europe when they go to university. Not everybody, right? Just because you want to be a doctor doesn't mean that you can go and become a doctor. Right? Our educational system is suffering in large part because our students aren't prepared, right? There's no equity in K through 12 education.
Mhm.
And that's killing us. Right? Yes, we say, okay, Asians, and there's that, right, that stereotypical, the perfect Asian. And we know there is not one affinity group. There's not one person in this world that is perfect, regardless of their affinity.
Mhm.
And they are pushed more towards math and science by their parents. It's a generational thing. And that's okay. But they also have the aptitude. What? Right? They have the aptitude towards it. It just it is what it is. You really can't change that. And from that DE&I lens, you're right. It's trendy. It's fatty. It's like, okay, we're going to talk about diversity for the next 2 years. Oh, now we're talking about inclusion. Oh, we want everyone to belong. What the fuck? I belong to my family. I do not want to belong to my organization. I want to feel like I belong to them, but I don't want to belong to them. There's a big difference in belong. But oh yes, now we're saying belonging, right? That's the new trend word. That's the new hot word. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. And right then there's equity, and it's trendy, it's hot. Oh crap, let's talk woke. Are you woke? I'm woke. Right, give me a break. Give me a break. I think when we look at our students right now, social media platforms have dumbed generations down, and it has stopped them from critically thinking or learning how to critically think. So they'd much rather, and it's right, this goes X down, much rather believe a Facebook post than to actually go and dig out the information. Hell, we had a president that lied every other friggin' sentence. And the world was okay with that, right? I mean, he still got 56% of the vote, right? That critical thinking is missing, and everything now has become politicized. Can you imagine, right? We talk about equity in education. The states like Texas and Florida, and if you're listening and you're in Texas and Florida, think about what your politics, what your governors and senators, think about what they're doing to the next generation of students. Because I'll be quite honest with you, in an organization where we're trying to hire the best and the brightest and the most diverse, if you don't understand American history, you're missing a critical component to understanding business.
So now you've touched on
Lots
As
there.
soon as you said, as soon as you said education in Texas and Florida, I have a pretty good idea that our producer would, oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Because here's the deal. I agree with you on that,
Yeah.
but New York is just as bad, if not worse.
Okay. Do
Okay.
they have legislation that's stopping teaching history?
Uh, I can't speak to that authoritatively, but don't get me wrong.
Hmm.
Again, not arguing with you. I think you're right, but I think that it's the two sides, right? Instead of hardcore right and hardcore left saying, okay, where do we agree? Let's work on that first. They're both digging trenches,
Yes.
okay? And they're, instead of saying, how do we make our society better? They're saying, how do we make it not like them?
Yeah.
In my world, this comes up often. I'm a huge Second Amendment supporter. Um, I have absolutely no problem with the idea that I should be trained to use something like that.
I
But
am.
yeah, so I have a concealed carry myself, and I am trained as well. Um, so I don't like. So from the hardcore perspective, you get these people that are like, "Thou shalt not infringe." I'm like, okay, fine, but that doesn't mean you don't have to take a class to carry the thing, so that if you pull it out of its
Exactly.
holster, you hit your target, right? So
Hmm.
there's that. But on the other side, you have things like New York, who you have to register your pepper spray. You're
Yes.
not allowed, you are not legally allowed to defend yourself unless you're on a list.
That's ridiculous.
It is. See, so it's that kind of thing. My producer just said, I never should have told you that. She lives in New York. Um,
That's awesome.
so, but that's the thing, right? Is that instead of us coming together and say, hey, look, okay, let's talk about healthcare. All right. Where are we good? Where are we bad? Well, although I am a nomad, my residence is in Washington State.
Yep.
Washington State is, generally speaking, a reasonable state. They are starting to go a little bit to California for me, but it's a good state. We've got good environment, decent schools. Um, but they have a commission or a committee or something that determines when an area needs a hospital and whether or not you can build one.
Hmm.
So what happens is in the town that I live in, we are in desperate need of a hospital that isn't tied to a church,
Yeah.
because we only have one hospital. It's tied to a church, which means that for those who
Hmm.
want dignity for death, they have to leave their home,
Yeah.
even though it's legal in Washington. You can't, it's difficult to get the drugs where we live because it is a faith affiliated hospital. Now, I don't have a problem with faith affiliated hospitals, but I also
Hmm.
think that if somebody wants to spend the money, let them build another hospital if they're not a faith affiliated.
Yeah.
Who is the government to tell me I can't build a hospital for my people, right? And it's on both sides. Anybody that thinks the Republicans are more about freedom isn't paying attention.
It's
It's just
on
a
both
different boot.
sides.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
a different boot on your neck. That's all it is.
Hmm.
All right. So we have covered quite a bit.
We really have.
I love your evidence-based, how you did the studies, and you see, and obviously others saw because you got your doctorate off of it,
Hmm.
that diversity is a result of inclusion. I would agree with that statement. I also agree that diversity is good, because otherwise you're just an echo
Hmm.
chamber.
Absolutely.
Um, and I think this is starting to happen. But it is, I think we went through a period of, well, not think, we know we went through a period of social unrest. That was a combination of, the authoritarian nature of certain police departments, as well as the lens that got driven on the wealth gap, and obviously
Hmm.
the pandemic. And now that that's starting to kind of mold together, and we're seeing the results of that, and some people are kind of pulling back, I'd like to say to our listeners, and fans of Dr. Lauran that it's time for the adults to take over again. It
Yes.
is time for the adults to stop cowering under the lens of whatever pressure their party, their political spectrum, their neighbor is going to yell at them about. Ignore the Karens, ignore the
Mm-hmm.
Kens, or whatever they're called. Step up, show some fucking integrity, and take back our society. And this isn't a Republican Democrat thing. This
No,
is
it's
a
not.
let's make it better thing.
Let's do the right thing. Let's do what's right for our citizens, regardless of affinities. Let's elevate that critical thinking. Let's stop being nasty to each other. Yeah, it's about damn time the adults take over. I couldn't agree more with you there. And apply that critical thinking lens to everything. I almost feel like this country, we wrote the Constitution, we created infrastructures, and then we did nothing for the last 100 years. And it's now come and bitten us in the ass. I mean, the right. We need education reform. We need telecommunication reform. I mean, there's everything we touch needs to be reformed to a globalized economy, not just a national economy as it was back when the Constitution was written. The world got a hell of a lot bigger, and we, as the United States, I think just we haven't kept up with it. Have not, right? We dumb it down almost, and we need to
I
stop.
I agree. And with that, this has been More Than a Refresh, a podcast about data and the people who wrangle it. Thank you to our guest, Dr. Lauran Star.